Tonight on The Late Debate, we pay tribute to Tessa Jowell, who died at the weekend. We also try to work out what lessons can be drawn from this month's council elections in London. But first, an inspiring politician who made a profound impression on all who met her. For more than 40 years, Tessa Jowell played a prominent role in public life. From Camden councillor to one of the architects of the London Olympics. Her final deeply moving speech in the House of Lords earned her a standing ovation. This week in the Commons, some of her friends and former colleagues paid their tributes.
She had an incredible gift for bringing people together and breaking down barriers, and it was unique and inspiring.
As well as being a feminist, and she was a feminist with many of us during the 70s, 80s and 90s, she was incredibly feminine. Her home was always filled with fresh flowers.
Having been friends with her and having been an employee of her, I saw the velvet and the steel.
Tessa Jowell's first attempt to become an MP in Ilford in 1978 wasn't successful. But by 1997, she was one of New Labour's rising stars, destined for a role in government and determined to make life easier for women.
What I'm doing is not any longer unusual, and the world needs to change to accommodate the fact that mums are both working and also bringing up their families.
For many Londoners, it was the successful bid for the Olympics which was Tessa Jowell's greatest achievement.
It was Tessa's vision, which she nurtured from idea to completion, that the London 2012 Olympics and Paralympics should not just be a singular sporting event, but the vehicle for transformative long-term investment in East London and the most authentic and glorious celebration of London and Londoners that we have ever seen.
Tessa Jowell's legacies are many. The Olympics, Sure Start, women's rights and now improved cancer care.
She was resolutely brave, not only in how she faced her treatment, but also through the way in which she spoke so openly about her illness.
She taught us how to live, and I think she also taught us how to die.
Tessa Jowell was the best of us.
A rare moment of absolute unity in the House of Commons chamber there, typical Tessa. To assess her career, I'm joined by two members of the Upper House. Labour colleague Lord Charlie Faulkner, who worked closely with Tessa, was at one point Minister for the Millennium Dome, and one of our greatest Paralympians, Baroness Tanni Grey-Thompson, who played a critical role in the London 2012 bid team and is now a board member of both the London Legacy Development Corporation and Transport for London. Welcome, both of you. Charlie, I suppose you probably knew Tessa longer than Tanni or I. What do you remember? What's your favourite memory of her?
I mean, she was a very, very unusual politician who was a big achiever. So what she would always do is build alliances with everybody with a view to achieving things. And you saw that she was a junior minister in the government in 1997. She delivered Sure Start, which is an extraordinary achievement for somebody in her position. But it was the result of being this very trusted, liked, popular person who was always focused on other people. She was very, very unusual.
Tanni, what do you remember most about your time with Tessa during the Olympic and Paralympic bid?
I first met her in about 2002 and she said, I want to bid for the Olympics and Paralympics. And like, okay, and there literally were about 4 or 5 people who thought it was a good idea. And she went round and, you know, she sat in front of Tony Blair, she sat in front of all these different people in sport, and just very gently and lovely just knocked their heads together. So they didn't even realise half the time that's what was happening. But she was the one that was the absolute driving force, because we'd bid with Birmingham, we'd bid with Manchester, we'd been unsuccessful, and everyone was a bit tired and they thought it was Paris's turn. And she was the one who said, no, we can do it. And her passion for the Paralympics was absolutely amazing. Without her, we wouldn't have had the amazing games that was 2012.
Charlie, were you convinced before?
Well, I don't think anybody was convinced. I think Tanni,
apart from Tessa,
absolutely got it right, which was everybody was sort of, well, this is not going to work, it'll cost us money, but you can have a go if you like. And she was the one who was driving it. And without her, unquestionably, the bid would never be put in, and we'd certainly never have won it. And that's a testament to her steel, but also her judgment about what could be achieved.
So she was the driving force at the beginning, but how crucial was her role as we progressed, to beating Paris, and then to deliver the Games?
I mean, all the way through. I mean, the night before the final presentation in Singapore, she came to me and she said, I want to stand on stage and say we're bidding for the Olympics and Paralympics, and all the advice was not to do it at the time.
Well, just to say Olympics?
Well, yeah, and actually my advice to her at that time was we need to win the Olympics, because we weren't bidding for both games, we were just bidding for the Olympics, and the Paralympics was an add-on at the time. And because of her influence, it became possible that now any city bidding for the games, it's both games. So she raised the level of the profile with the IOC, and she was that gentle person. She was just there, and you should just look at people. She had this amazing sort of determination, just lovely, kind look. But you knew if she asked you to do something, there was a really good reason why you were being asked to do it. And as Charlie said, it was for the greater. It was for other people. It was never about her. It was about delivering the best games. And I think the respect that the parties, the Conservative Party showed for her when she wasn't minister during the 2012 games, they still treated her as if she was minister.
Charlie, you've been a close friend throughout her illness.
Yeah.
How did she manage to stay so optimistic?
Because, I mean, in a sense, the illness was a sort of awful, appalling test of her character, and she passed it with absolutely flying colours. She was constantly concerned about how other people were reacting. I saw her last Wednesday, and the illness was taking its toll, not just physically, but also in her ability to do things, and conversation was becoming more difficult. And we had a conversation in which I was saying, look, how do you feel about the whole thing? And she said, well, it is what it is. And she was completely clear-eyed about what was happening, brave, phlegmatic, and like she had been all the time I had known her for over 40 years, absolutely determined that other people wouldn't suffer and would benefit from what happened.
Which makes it very hard for the people around her, but amazing that she could do that.
Yeah, it makes it incredibly hard for the people around her, because the appallingness that she has gone, the poignancy of her death, makes one feel absolutely gutted about what we've lost and how brave and terrific she was. But my goodness me, she's achieved in the way that she died so much more than almost anybody has achieved in relation to cancer care.
How critical was she to the New Labour project?
She was a huge influencer on making the tent as big as possible, because Tessa could reach anybody and everybody trusted Tessa. I mean, we went through a period as time went on where trust ebbed, as it does with practically any government, but trust never ebbed.
It's said she persuaded Tony Blair when he was having a wobble at one point to stay on in Downing Street.
I'm sure that is right, because there was a big period of time when we were sort of falling out among ourselves, and she was very good at saying, keep going, and he did. Tanny rightly identifies the fact that the Conservatives were more than happy, indeed keen, to keep Tessa involved in the Olympics. And if you see in the Lords, she achieved so much in the Lords by being a trusted figure. And she remained a trusted figure at a point when most politicians were slumping in public esteem.
Tanny, you're a member of the London Legacy Development Corporation, struggling to get a commercial sponsor for the naming rights of the stadium. How about the Tessa Jowell Stadium?
That would be very nice. Actually, I think there'd be a huge amount of support for that, because anybody involved in sport recognises what she did. And, it's all the other things that she did as well. But for in terms of putting British sport on the map, we have so much to thank her for. And every Paralympic athlete coming through now, needs to understand what an important figure she was in the movement. She didn't come from the Paralympic movement, but she's just raised it to a whole new level.
Tanny, Charlie, thank you so much for coming in to share your memories of Tessa, who I think everyone who encountered her will say she was a very, very special politician. Thank you very much. Now, earlier this month, London went to the polls. Pundits told us it was going to be a rout with the Conservatives all but run out of town. It didn't quite work out that way. 24 hours before polling day, and London's mayor was making a final push for Labour votes in St John's Wood, part of Tory Westminster. Labour hopes were riding high.
We can make history in Westminster for the first time ever. Potentially it could become Labour. Barnet hasn't been outright Labour ever. Wandsworth was the last one by Labour in 1974. Those are the sort of battles I like having, the sort of challenges that we in Labour need to have. There should be no no-go area for Labour in London.
But as the votes were counted the following night, Labour's ambitions got a reality check. In Sadiq Khan's local borough, Wandsworth, Labour picked up half a dozen seats, but not enough to take control of the council. Little wonder the Prime Minister was soon on the doorstep of the town hall.
This was one of their top targets and they threw everything at it, but they failed.
The easiest target for Labour should have been Barnet, a council with no party in overall control. The Tories ended up with a majority of 13. A borough with a large Jewish population, apparently sending a clear message about anti-Semitism.
So far we haven't heard anything from the Labour leadership on what happened. It was the first time in Labour's history that we were rejected for being racist, not because of our economics, but because people thought we were racist.
And you blame Jeremy Corbyn and the leadership?
I blame the leadership for not dealing with it quickly enough.
Labour did get control of one extra council, Tower Hamlets, but the real winners were the Lib Dems, taking Kingston and Richmond to add to Sutton.
These are boroughs that have traditionally swung between the Tories and Lib Dems, so no great surprise there. But I think the size of the victory in both those boroughs was a surprise.
It was enough for Sir Vince Cable to proclaim the return of three-party politics and announce the Lib Dems were in strong recovery mode. To discuss those elections, I'm joined by, for Labour, the Westminster North MP Karen Buck, for the Conservatives, the Sutton and Cheam MP and Vice Chairman for London Paul Scully, and for the Green Party, co-leader Jonathan Bartley, who also became a Lambeth councillor this month. Welcome all of you. Karen, what went wrong for Labour?
Well, I don't think an awful lot went wrong for Labour in London, in the sense that we got our best result here since 1971. And if you look at the vote share, it was actually extremely impressive. I think what has changed over a number of years is that London has become increasingly a Labour city. And if you look at what happened in terms of the general election last year, that was absolutely reinforced as well. So,
but not winning any extra councils is a blow.
Barnet was a disappointment, absolutely, and we may come back to talking about that. Westminster and Wandsworth. In Westminster, my own borough, the vote share ended up 42% Conservative, 41% Labour. In Westminster. In Wandsworth, we came within 200 votes of winning. So disappointing in terms of wards, but in terms of the total result, I really would be a bit careful about talking it up as a disaster or down as a disaster.
Paul, the Lib Dems' resurgence in South West London, that must worry you.
It was a disappointing night in Kingston and Richmond, clearly.
And Richmond, you lost 28 councillors, wasn't
We did, and Vince Cable was talking about three-party politics. Actually, it was three-and-a-half-party politics because he was partly dependent on the Green Party and doing a deal to prop him up in there. But the one borough that they run services in Sutton, actually, we doubled our number of councillors, and that's partly, and with 3 independents coming on because of their unpopular decision to build an incinerator, where again, that's something that they campaign against in other parts of the country.
Jonathan, the Greens had... congratulations, by the way, you are now a councillor, you have a mandate. The Greens put up something like 800 candidates in London out of the almost 2,000 council seats that were being contested. You ended up with 11. It's not quite a Green surge, is it?
17% increase in what we had before. I think that's a good news story. We're not trying to say that we're going to suddenly be running London, but certainly, where I stood, as you said, in Lambeth, we got 19% of the vote, and it really was the voting system which held us back. Proportionally, to have 20% of the seats in Lambeth would have been a fair result. That's the kind of vote that we were getting in many parts of London. As Karen said, I don't think it was a disastrous night for Labour. Journalists shouldn't be taken in by the expectations management of the political parties, but they should also recognise that it isn't three-party politics or 3.5-party politics. It is 4-party politics. And, where Greens have been elected, they're making a huge difference and a very important difference to
You
local
mentioned the
communities.
voting system. The two main parties don't want to change it, but we've got a situation where now in 3 councils, they are one-party states, Labour councils, places like Barking and Dagenham and Newham. Isn't it really time for a change, at least in local government, for proportional representation?
Well, no, I would congratulate the Greens in Lambeth. Clearly, I would have loved more Conservative councillors there, but it is important that actually there is a proper sense of democracy, because when you get that, what I was doing when I was going around London, you see the one-party states, I was just getting a sense that too many Labour councillors had a sense of entitlement rather than a sense of duty.
So isn't PR the answer?
No, I don't think it is. I think it's actually a matter of us making our case. And so we were running a very 32-borough campaign because it wasn't about London. We're not electing a mayor. We were electing different people. Different boroughs have different characteristics, and it's really important.
How is it fair that 19% of the people in Lambeth voted for the Greens, yet we have 5 out of 63 seats on the council? How is that in any shape or form representing what local people wanted?
Because you have the difference between, do you want to break the link between a ward councillor and a borough-wide councillor. You know, there are...
that's nonsense. You can have system of PR
Karen, are you in favour of PR?
Personally, for local government, I am, and have always been.
Does it worry you that some of these Labour councils in London are now one-party states? So that's an awful lot of power vested in one party.
I don't know why you're picking on Labour councils for this, but as I say, my own borough, 42% Conservative, 41% Labour.
But it's not 100% Conservative, but in three London boroughs now, they are 100% Labour.
As a general rule, I don't think it's at all reasonable to pick on any single authority that happens under the present system to have got domination. But as a principle, I think it is healthier to have a greater representation. And I think the argument about a more proportional system that applies in some ways to a parliamentary system, the link between a Member of Parliament and the constituency doesn't apply in local government, where you already have multi-member wards. I think it's entirely possible to have a more representative system in local government that will more closely reflect the diversity of opinion. But the other thing that I think is really important, we're way overdue a review of some of our ward boundaries. There are wards in London where the population is probably half of the wards that are very near to them. You know, the population that elects a councillor in, say, Knightsbridge, entirely different to the population that elects councillors in somewhere like Church Street. Completely unfair, and that has to be tackled.
Can you see any way back for the Tories in some of those boroughs that have now gone completely Labour? Look at Lewisham. It once had Tory MPs, but now it's got 100% Labour councillors.
Yeah, I mean, look, my job title is Vice Chairman for London. It's not Vice Chairman for London elections. So there's a big bit of work to do now, and it is really reconnecting London with the message that we need to be expressing, which is positive, because people move to London, whether it's from around the world or indeed around the country, for opportunity. And what we've failed to do over a while is actually express ourselves about the positive things that we are doing to promote opportunity, to meet people's aspirations, and that's what we're going to have to do.
Jonathan, there are 5 of you on Lambeth. What difference can you make?
Well, we've already one councillor over the last 4 years made a huge difference in Lambeth. Back in 2009, when we had one councillor as well, we got living wage on the agenda and transformed, the borough into a living wage employer. Lambeth Council now being extended to contractors. We got an end to the evictions the council were pursuing. We're defending 6 estates which are marked for demolition against residents' wishes. In Lambeth, it's interesting. Jeremy Corbyn wants the residents on the estates to have a say. The Mayor of London wants the residents to have a say. The people on the estates want a say. The only people denying it to them is Lambeth Council, so they need representation to stand up for them.
Estate regeneration didn't appear to be the big issue that people were predicting before the election. Possibly in Lambeth,
of course. But the narrative, is, of course, is that it's a national swing, but that's not what happens in those wards that change hands. It's very much a local issues. And in Gypsy Hill, where the Central Hill estate is, that was Labour's safest seat in the whole of Lambeth, and we won it in this election. That's how things can change hands when people aren't being listened to.
Labour tried to make estate regeneration the big winning point in Barnet. Now, Barnet, we have a good idea what went wrong. How embarrassing is it?
The situation in Barnet? Well, I think it's tremendously disappointing, because I know a lot of councillors and candidates in Barnet who were great and who fought a really...
These are candidates who were telling your party leadership there was a problem.
No, there clearly was an issue in terms of how the anti-Semitism story unfolded in London, and particularly in Barnet. No question about that. And I think it's humbling. I mean, it's a shocking for our party to have to deal with this. I set a higher bar for our party on these things
what does
than
the
I
leadership
do
need to do?
from others. Well, I mean, clearly what we now have to do is a combination of things. It's swift action against any individuals who are found to be expressing themselves in an anti-Semitic way, and make sure that there isn't a delay in processing that. And also, I think a really, really clear, constant message, which Jeremy, to be fair, has absolutely done, did an Evening Standard article, but has to be constantly reinforced, that we cannot have people casually employing anti-Semitic language and tropes on social media.
You've worked closely in the past with Ken Livingstone. Should he be thrown out of the party now?
I think it's now time for Ken to go. I do. I mean, I have worked closely with Ken, and I think it's sad where we've got to. But clearly, the Jewish community is looking for a clear signal as to how we're responding to that, and Ken is part of that.
Barnet, you must be very pleased to have taken it back, but was it just because of the Jewish vote? Are you in danger of losing it next time?
It's something we need to work on. Clearly, I was actually in Barnet on the day. So, I have had the media, when we're talking about media expectations, I had the media after the weekend after the election say, you never thought you were going to lose Westminster, you never thought you were really going to lose these councils. Well, yeah, we knew it was going to be a choppy election for us, being mid-term, being 8 years into a Conservative government. So I did spend time on the Thursday in Barnet, in Westminster, making sure that we were getting every vote out. And it's important that over the next 4 years, until the next next local election, which may well be a double-header with the general election, that we continue the message of why Conservatives provide the best public services.
Jonathan, we've heard the phrase peak Corbyn reached being used. Do you detect that?
I don't know. I mean, to make any kind of predictions like this in the current climate, I think you're on a hiding to nothing. You know, things are so unexpected at the moment. It does feel to me like the Labour vote, though, is very soft in London, and where there is a local issue, people are very willing to, you know, vote more than ever according to what's going on in their local area. So where councils have become complacent, have been one-party states, have taken people for granted, in local elections, people are turning around and giving those politicians a really good kicking. So, you know, I think to just see it, local elections, in terms of peak Corbyn and not peak Corbyn, is perhaps the wrong way to look at what's going on here.
Are you worried about councils like Haringey, Karen?
Sort of contradicted by the evidence, because actually what we saw last year was a return to two-party politics at scale. So, you know, I think what we do need to do is, avoid drawing too many conclusions from local elections, because there will be specific issues that will occur in a particular ward. It could be a piece of local politics like an estate, it could be all kinds of different things. But when it comes to a general election, then as we saw last year, where we were absolutely wiped out in the local elections in 2017 and came through to an incredibly strong showing in the general election, that you really, really can't do too many conclusions.
You all agree that UKIP is a busted flush in London now?
I think it's fascinating to look at what's happened to UKIP, because, of course, this is the point when you look at things in a national scale in the opinion polls. UKIP had this massive national rise, and, of course, they got councillors over the line, but without those councillors really working very, very hard. And, of course, when they drop in the opinion polls, all those seats miraculously vanish. What you've seen with the Greens is a build and a build and a build and a build, and when Greens get elected, they deliver, and that's why we keep our seats, and that's why we carry on making gains.
Paul, has the curse of the coalition finally been shaken off by the Lib Dems?
No, I think there were particular circumstances and the way that the Lib Dems campaigned in Kingston and Richmond, and as I say, in Sutton, where they actually run services, they did pretty poorly, having run the borough for 32 years. The fact that independents are now in the area, the ward that actually has an incinerator, which, as I say, the Lib Dems in Kingston were saying one thing, campaigning against things that Lib Dems in Sutton were actually doing. So there's very much say one thing in one area, say another in another area.
Karen, do you detect signs of the Lib Dems resurgence? They picked up seats in Haringey.
No, I don't. I mean, I think, as I say, that there are always going to be some scope for third parties, for smaller parties making some gains. I really don't see a story of any kind of smaller party breakthrough at the moment. I think quite the reverse.
Karen, Paul, Jonathan, we've run out of time. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. And thank you to all my guests tonight, to Charlie, Tanny, Karen, Paul and Jonathan. I'll be here next month. Until then, thank you for watching and good night.